So I've put together a preaching series, teaching series for this Lent. Lent is a time in which we endeavor to draw near to the cross, near to where Jesus suffers and dies for our sake. And we draw near to that to try to understand it, to try to absorb it, make sense of it. We try to learn from it. We try to grow from it. And Lent is a period of time like that. And so it's also a really good time in which we try to learn something new, or at least confirm something we already knew with a teaching series of sorts. And so this Lent, I have chosen to offer something that I really find dear to my heart and soul. I won't always offer a teaching series like this in the season of Lent. So I hope that these 5 weeks give to us something that helps us to understand why we Lutherans are very unique in the world when it comes to the plurality of Christianity in our world. I hope that over these next 5 weeks, the cumulative effect helps us to understand why we're a little weird in this world. All right? Not just your pastor's weird, because that's true, but why we Lutherans are a little unique. Here's what I mean by that. I'm going to start off with today's lesson is one of just foundational stuff of being a Lutheran. And upon today's teaching, everything else, at least in my opinion, everything else of what it means to be a Lutheran is sort of built on this. And so here's an example of what I mean. I was in my second church, and some of you have heard a little bit about this story. My second church, I was down in Honeybrook, Pennsylvania, and we had the blessing of some really great bluegrass musicians in our sanctuary, in our church. And they came to me when I was about a year into the ministry there and said, Pastor Rich, we enjoy playing bluegrass, and we love bluegrass gospel, and we would like you to come over and we'll play a little music for you and we'll have some dinner. So Danielle and I went over and we listened to some music, and we heard some music, and it was fantastic. Our toes were tapping, we were clapping to the music, and it was all very sort of gospel-oriented stuff. And out of that meeting, that dinner, came this conversation about throwing and creating a bluegrass-oriented worship service on Sunday evenings. So we built this, and it took some time. We took a good bit of time to pull the pieces together and to get people to come. But once we had people coming, it was just famously successful for a while. So one of the services, part of the pitch was that people could bring their own bluegrass instruments. And we had Howard and Ramona, they were like our house band. And if you brought your own instrument, you could sort of jam with Howard and Ramona after worship, because we would always have a fellowship time afterwards with snacks and things. And that was a time in which if you brought your own instrument, you could sort of jam with Howard and Ramona, and we would all enjoy that and clap along and so forth. So we're enjoying that, and this attracted people across denominations. It wasn't just Lutherans showing up. The crowd of people that enjoyed bluegrass music spans through, we were down, there was an Amish farm right next to us. They would come over. There was Mennonite folks. There was Baptist folks. The music attracted across denominations. Well, one day after the service, during this fellowship time, there was a wonderful woman who came up to me, and I had seen her in church on this bluegrass service for several weeks, but we had never really connected or talked. And she came up to me afterwards. She said, Pastor Rich, she said, I really like the way you preach. She said, you preach as if you're saved. And then she said the next thing. She asked me that question that maybe you've heard. When were you saved? Have you ever been asked that question? We Lutherans are caught off guard by that, right? That's a weird question for us. It doesn't fit with our understanding, our outlook. That's because we're different. My answer was, I wish I had thought this through a little more. My answer was not the most hospitable. I jokingly said, well, there was this guy about 2,000 years ago. He died on his cross, and I've been saved ever since. And She said, no. I mean, when were you saved? There was this guy about 2,000 years ago. He died on a cross. I didn't know what else to say. That is our Lutheran answer to that question. The date in my calendar that I prayed a prayer or something is not a part of the question. It's not really an answer to the question. It's not about what I do. It's not about a day when I did something. It's about a day when Jesus did something. We Lutherans, it's not about what we do. It's always about what Jesus does. It's about what God does with Jesus, even through the cross to get to us. You heard in the gospel today this one line. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, depending on how you interpret that through me part, changes your whole sort of outlook on this from, say, a Lutheran perspective to the more sort of Baptist or the decision-based theology that came to be in that question. See, Lutherans would take that through me and realize that the through me is Jesus saying, through what I do for you. No one comes to the Father except through what I'm about to do tomorrow, because that text is the night before the crucifixion. Through what I'm about to do for you. No one comes to the Father except through what I do for you. That's how we interpret that through me. Through the lens of our Lutheran outlook on things. Now, others will take that and say, no one gets to the Father except through me, and they would take that and they would say, but Jesus, so Jesus dies, and therefore it's through what you do now, it's through what we do as people to believe it and trust it and be obedient to it and so forth. Leaving the true point of efficacy on God's salvation not on what God does, but on what we do. It's about when you were saved, not about when Jesus saved you. You see the difference there? That subtle difference makes all the difference. And it's what makes us uncomfortable with that question. When someone says, are you saved? The answer is yes, my friends. Always answer yes. Yes. But pinning it down to a date, I have story after story that I share with you in sermons and different things, little anecdotes, moments of my life from my grandmother telling me Bible stories as bedtime stories. Sitting on my grandmother's knee, looking out at the stars, saying, where did they come from? And my grandmother saying, God made them. My pastor helping me through a really challenging time. My youth group helping me get to Camp Luther, where I encountered congregational kind of ministry in a new way. You name it. I have story after story after story where my heart has been opened wide by what God is doing with me. But to ask me to take one singular event, one prayer, one moment in time, and separate it as something that I did that somehow triggered God's grace to somehow in that moment be efficacious for me and my salvation, I can't pull it apart. Everything is strung together in a beautiful kind of necklace of pearls or something, as another theologian would describe it. Taking one out still leaves a whole lot of other things that are all connected together. God has been shaping and forming this particular Christian before you through expected and unexpected ways his entire life. Pulling one event out and saying that one mattered and that was the day that I did it, doesn't it put now the emphasis on me instead of what God has done? You see, and that's why we Lutherans get uncomfortable with this question. Because it's not about us. From a Lutheran, we have been baptized and bathed in a theology and a teaching that never puts the emphasis on what we do. It's always about what God does. And that's why that is a little awkward for us. The language we use for these ways of teaching or understanding is called theology of the cross I'm just putting this into your head. You don't need to memorize. It's not a test next week. Theology of the cross. Theology of the cross is a uniquely Lutheran way of looking at what God does through the cross for our sake, and pushing that against what Luther called the theology of glory. It suggests that somehow our glory is in what we do now. Theology of the cross humbles us and aligns us with every other human out there, struggling to unburden ourselves so that God can free us by his absolutely unconditional gift of grace. That there's nothing we can do to stop it. I have an illustration for you. Okay, I hope there's not been a Lutheran pastor do this before, because I'm doing all this, then, you've already seen this. But here we go. If you're in my class this morning, you know what's coming. A lot of people believe in a kind of ladder or stairway to heaven. I love the Led Zeppelin song, but we Lutherans don't put a lot of faith in it, a lot of hope in it. But nevertheless, a lot of people still do. And it's what makes us Lutherans unique and different. A lot of people look at this ladder. God is up there, and I'm down here where there's living and dying and suffering and sin. I want to get up to heaven. I want to get to God. So we believe, well, if I'm a good person, I'm better than where I was. If I just do good things. Maybe I come to church every once in a while, Christmas and Easter, something like that. Show a little something to God. I'm not terribly bad. I'm not like those people. Maybe I start coming to church every week. Oh, may God help me. Maybe I get on church council. Maybe I really do good and I go to college and I get good grades and everything is going really well for me. Surely God would love me now. And I go up one more. Oh gosh, the view is nice up here. I'm way above everybody. I must be better than all of y'all. I got it all figured out. Look at me up here. I went to seminary. I got it all figured out. I know this stuff. Look at me. I can almost touch God if God is at the top. You people down there, you need to figure it out. You all down there, let me show you the way. I know how to get to God. I'll teach you. I'll show you. Follow me. See what's wrong with that equation? We're not following Jesus now. And boy, does this create power. Because if you think this is the way to God, and you start climbing, and you get up here, you don't want to give up this power. Because now I can judge everybody. Everybody who supports this system, now, if I can climb to the top, I'm in charge. And I'm the boss. And I tell you how to get to God. And you follow me. There's great power in this. The Pharisees back in Jesus' time did not want to let go of it. The Pharisees of our time don't want to let go of it either. Our Lutheran church does not believe in this. Our Lutheran teachings, we don't go up to God. God comes down. He hangs out with poor schmucks like me and you, who are struggling, burdened, trying to figure out what it means to be a Christian in this world, who every day have questions about our faith, who wonder how in the world God could ever love me. Just like that anthem we heard. To pay attention to that anthem, that was spot on. How in the world could God ever love me? That's the God that comes down to you and me. You see, for we Lutherans, it's not about anything we do. It's always about what Jesus is doing with us in the moment, right now. It's never about even the grace of what would Jesus do, even that is a little bit off for we Lutherans. Because it's past tense. For we Lutherans, it's what is Jesus doing with me now? What is Jesus doing with my church? Where am I called to today? What is going on with the world that I can help with today? In which direction is Jesus calling me? In what ways do I need to let go of my desire to be back up on that ladder so that I can actually be down here following Jesus rather than up there trying to get people to follow me? You see, from a Lutheran perspective, God always takes the first step. God always comes down to us. God always loves us before we'd ever love God. Jesus is the proof of it. Jesus is the evidence. Jesus is the one we look to that shows us that there's nothing we can do to get to God. That's the bottom line. From a Lutheran perspective, there's nothing you can do to get to God. Period. Period. End of story. Stop trying. Because every time we try to get to God, it's our effort now. And we want to give glory to ourselves. We want to tell everybody about what we did. No, stop. Let go. God comes down and loves you most unexpectedly in places you least expected, through people you least expect. When Jesus commands us to love our enemies, it's because sometimes our enemies show us the love of God in ways we weren't expecting. You see, on this idea, on this theology, we Lutherans are very different, very unique, and it forces us to go through life humbled by it, instead of trying to climb the ladder of power and glory of our own. We're humbled, and we're made then to be on the same level, because there is no ladder. We're all in this thing called humanity together. And Jesus comes to us and loves us. He calls us to love one another. And in that paradigm, our hearts break because we have so much trouble doing it. Even when our heart breaks, there we are at the foot of the cross again. And Jesus once again loves us again, saying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. My friends, if you're stirred, if you're shaken, if the things of this world have you burdened to some level of trying to climb a ladder, if you feel the burden of perfection, if you're like me and you have a terror of rejection, that's me. I am terrified of rejection. If you're like me, if you're like the world out there uses these sore spots as ways of getting the best of us, burdening us, putting loads upon our shoulders, making us think we got to constantly climb. Here's the thing. It doesn't work with God. We can let go of that stuff. There is no rejection with God. God loves you. He sent His Son to die for you. End of story.